Nice. So I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone. This is our first TribeTalks session where our main goal is to be inspiring conversations that add value to the audience by inviting people from different backgrounds for informal conversations around specific TA topics, best practices, trends, real life stories, and so on. And in this first session, we'll be talking about skills first hiring in tech. And our very special guest today is Alessandra Leone, Tech TA Lead. Please feel free to introduce yourself first and tell the audience more about you if you want.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Edu. Thank you for inviting me to be the first person to speak in Tribe Talks. I'm Alessandra Leone, so I am a psychologist that has been working with TA for the past 8 to 9 years, mostly in tech recruitment, been into smaller startups and bigger companies, work also for a governmental institution for the Finnish government, also with talent acquisition. So a little bit of my career is basically building tech teams with quality and speed. And of course, when it comes to evaluating cultural fit and soft skills, as a psychologist, this is like what I really like is like how assessing those skills are important, for the company and for the success of the hiring process. So I'm really glad to talk about this topic today with you.
Very nice. Thanks a lot for the nice introduction. It's a pleasure to have you here today in our first session. So I'll share a quick intro on my side as well before we start. So I'm Edu, I'm senior TA partner at Tribe from Spain. I started in recruitment in 2012 in Dublin. Then I moved to London before relocating back to Spain, where I've been working for many types of companies, tech startups, large companies, and agencies as well, mostly focused on the tech industry. Also, my other passion is on the training and employer branding side, where I've implemented different initiatives from scratch in different companies. So I'd say I really enjoy that creative side of everything I do, and that's at some point connected to the things we'll be discussing today. So in this session, we'll be diving into why human skills are increasingly getting more and more relevant than coding skills. I don't know how much the audience agree with this. Let me know in the comments if you want. But somehow soft skills and the way of how we assess them really impact the hiring process in many different ways. No, so we'll start with a round of questions related to the topic. And then we'll try to leave a few minutes at the end for any questions the audience may have. And for everyone listening, feel free to also share your thoughts and comments in the chat so we can potentially discuss them as well. Sorry in advance if we can get to all the questions. This is our first session, so we'll do our best and try to manage the time as best as we can, since we only have 30 minutes for this talk. If that happens, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or discuss any thoughts you may have offline. So that being said, a first question for you, Alessandra, from your experience in Tech TA, which soft skills most strongly influence hiring decisions, and how do they impact candidate success throughout the hiring process, in your opinion, Alessandra?
Amazing. I think this is a super, super good question. I think that overall recruitment has been changing a lot. Now in the area of AI, we are kind of asking ourselves how is the best way to assess this type of soft skills when you have like 1 hour with a candidate and so on. And as I mentioned before, like being a psychologist myself, this is what I love about recruitment, is like assessing behaviors and assessing potential throughout candidates' fewer answers, of questions that you're going to do. So how can we assess this better, and what are the soft skills that I see that are most commonly required? I don't think there is like a recipe for success, in terms of a group of soft skills that are going to be global for every single company. But of course, when it comes to I would say communication. It will be the first one. Having a good and straightforward communication, or having a communication that you are able to really express yourself and show the things that you have done with accuracy and in the positive way. I think this is very, very important. You can have a lot of achievements in your career, you can have had amazing experience, but if you're not able to communicate this in a proper way, this is definitely going to impact your hiring process. And by proper way, I mean that this can be very different from one company to another, depending on the culture of the company. Like what is expected for you to highlight in this communication can vary depending on the company and the culture of the company. So the narrative that you bring in your communication is quite crucial. That's why it's also important for you to understand the company culture that you're applying for, and building also, the way that you present your ideas in your results around it. I would say that one that everybody talks a lot is like the problem solving skills, which basically doesn't mean anything if you just understand, with problem solving, but which kind of problems and which kind of solutions do you expect. But I think this is much more on how the person approach problems, and what are the type of behaviors that are expected for this specific role. So when we talk about, for example, startups or tech companies that are growing, we expect people to be autonomous and to approach challenges with enthusiasm and with energy, and this is something that you will only be able to evaluate if you make the right questions to it, and if you assess, what's behind of the motivation towards like solving these problems, and how the person reacts when there is a problem, and depending on the culture, again, the culture is very important, because something that you can say to a team, like an answer that you can give to a recruiter, might be positive, and for another recruiter might not be that positive, depending on the expectations for the role. And of course, the seniority. As you're growing in your career, you're more senior, is expected for you to be more autonomous and handle more ambiguity and so on. So this is also something that is gonna impact the way they're gonna perceive. Apart from like communications and problem solving skills, I think that's something that is very important in tech teams. It's like flexibility and resilience towards different changes. We know that this market is a market that is always evolving, things are changing. So it is important that candidates and talents, they feel not only excited with the potential of changes, but they are also feel comfortable, because it will change. You will have to deal with migrations, you will have to deal with new technologies, and it is part of this environment of like most of the companies to deal with this kind of changes. So also assessing how the person feels around it can be really crucial, especially if you're in an environment that is growing really fast, and you're going to have people that are able to really feel comfortable around movement and overall changes. So I would say that these three are one of the most important ones. But of course, as I mentioned, like there is not one group of soft skills that I believe that are universal. I believe that depending on the role, the seniority in the company, this can vary a lot. And that's why it's very important for when you are applying for a company, you really understand the culture and you really understand what is required for that specific role that you are applying for.
Yeah, 100% agree. Very, very relevant. Just to share my thoughts here as well. As you mentioned, communication skills, like the ability to explain ideas in a structured way and concise way. It's very, very, very important. Candidate who's really listening to your question, getting straight to the point, and avoiding sharing irrelevant information is always a good sign, right? So super, super important. But also something to keep in mind is that sometimes interviewers cannot clearly understand the candidate's level of expertise based on how the message is presented. This is very relevant during internal debriefs sessions where hiring manager, the interviewers, and the TA person discuss the pros and cons before deciding about the candidate and the level. So the more clear and consistent your story and narrative, as you mentioned before, are as a candidate, the easier the candidate will make it for the different interviewers in the process, right? And the better the applications can be defended in that internal final discussion during the debrief, right? So it's not only important to provide structured, clear, and concise answers, but also the way of how candidates present that information is key. So the impact and the examples they share should be aligned with the role, and then keep that consistent through the different stages of the process, so they avoid that interviewers have different versions of you, and that can affect the decision-making layer at the end, right? If that makes sense. So it's not only about like sharing your expertise and impact, but also how clearly your narrative connects to the role you're applying for. Because if you're not showing that, then hesitation can appear, and then people will start making a lot of assumptions, right? And as a candidate, you wouldn't want that, basically, no? Usually, hiring teams often look for different things they understand as signals of seniority, like ownership and accountability, navigating ambiguity, stakeholder management, and these kind of things. And many candidates actually, I think, do these things already, just that they probably don't communicate them in the right way. In the past, for example, I used to receive like emails from candidates after the rejection message, feeling disappointed with the decision, and then showing like a lot of confidence regarding the skills and potential, and pushing me a lot to put them again in the process, because they feel like, hey, I don't understand why I was rejected, right? Probably they are right, probably not. There are many elements here to analyze. So at least something interesting to double check from both sides of the table, I'd say. And then apart from communication, basically radical honesty, I think. I mean, you were mentioning problem solving, communication as some of the examples. But radical honesty, for example, for me, it's very, very important. It really builds trust, right? Being transparent about what you know, what you don't, and meeting a gap in knowledge. So if a candidate is not showing that, for example, doing a screening call, from it's a clear red flag. So a potential reason to reject the candidate. So basically to finalize, very, very relevant for software engineers, but also for TAs who are doing this exercise and making an effort to understand the context and the other side of the table, because with that, we can have like better internal discussions and improve the way of how we assess candidates, right?
Exactly.
Alessandra, do you have any interesting stories about candidates, hiring managers that you'd happy to share and that you can tell publicly, of course, to the audience? I don't know if you have an example.
I have. Yes, for sure. Well, I have many, like overall throughout the years. I think that soft skills are the ones that are always on the table in the debrief session, where there are some kind of inconsistency in between how TA people evaluate and hiring managers or more technical people. I think that's something that is more and more relevant, is how candidates structure their communication and how they present their ideas. It might be that as a partner, you also have to do some coaching with your hiring managers towards like, what are the expectations, right? And this has to be something done before as a pre-work. Like from what I have been seeing, a lot of rejections are because candidates were not able to communicate or structure the communication in the way that the hiring managers expected, right? And I think that is also part of our job as TA partners to understand, okay, but these expectations that you have, where does it come from, right? And how can we make sure that this is something that is clear also for the candidate. Preparing the candidate, doing preparation calls, I think it's very relevant, because sometimes, and when we talk about international recruitment, we are interviewing people from all over the world, people from Asia, people from Latin America, North America, people from different cultures, backgrounds, and company cultures where the communications are different. And we cannot expect like candidates to reply exactly on the same way that we do in the company that we are working with. So I would say that the most recent cases, it was towards like how candidates communicated, and as state partners having to do this coaching with hiring managers that, hey, what are that you are evaluating here, because we need to, if the message that the candidate share was understood, and if you have all of the answers that you asked, why this is being a problem. I also think that one example that I can share is about looking on candidates behaviors towards the process, like the inconsistency too. And I think this happens a lot because candidates sometimes they might be prepared to answer a specific range of questions. And I know that this is, with AI, a lot of people like prepare answers. Myself as a TA partner, I already saw like candidates that were reading, while we're in the interview, and it was clear that it was using AI, which is definitely not recommended. 100% more like being honest and, really showing up yourself and trusting your answers. But I think that the inconsistency between stages, this is really important. Like, it is important for you to show that you can build the same level of like trust between the processes, between the interviews that you are doing. So I would say it is not one specific example, it's more a general experience that I have been having, specifically with the topic of communication, that it is basically the base of everything, because in an interview process, you have 1 hour to understand a lot of things. So I think communication plays a big part on it.
Yeah, very interesting. I can see the first comments, Alessandra. So thanks a lot, Angel, for commenting. So very, very interesting example. And so yeah, basically, we mentioned several soft skills, right, that are impacting hiring process. You were mentioning communication, problem solving. Then we also mentioned radical honesty. But as tech professionals, Alessandra, how can we better assess soft skills? What approaches or practices have you found to be truly effective for identifying these skills in the screening call? What elements should we basically take into consideration in your experience?
Amazing. I think that as state partners, the pre-work is very important. So the pre-work is meaning you have a good kickoff meeting with the hiring manager. You really understand what does success look like for the position that you're hired. What of these soft skills, what behaviors are expected, so you can really during your interview you can really understand if the person has or does not have the qualities that you're looking for. So doing this pre-work so you can come to these interviews already with a concept of what you're looking for is very relevant. And not just having a generalistic view of like, what does problem solving look like? But if you don't know what type of problems that the person will have to solve, so it's something very specific for each position that you're hiring for. I think that other points that are very relevant is that whenever you're doing some behavioral questions, whether it's a question that you ask, for example, with a candidate, like, tell me something that you have done in the past that you didn't succeed or that you would have done differently. Probably the candidate will have something in mind, will have something prepared. And it's very important that you understand the narrative, not only the outcome, like how is the person presenting the answers? Like what are the highlights, what are the things that come into your attention? and also doing follow-up questions on these answers, trying to dive a little bit deeper into like what were the things that you would do differently, what are the things that now if you would be in the same position, how you would react. That also comes with this having these hypothetical scenarios, which is something that I really like, for you to really understand how the person would react in a scenario that could happen for the role that you're hiring for, and having this element of surprise to the candidate, so the person can also like give you a fresh answer. For me, it's quite important to evaluate some skills, how the person respond, and if these answers are consistent as the answers that the person had with like the overall previous experience. I think that's something that we don't speak a lot about, is like the quality of the debrief sessions and the roles inside of the debrief sessions. That this is also a way that not for TA to assess, but for TA to build more knowledge towards the people that you're hiring for. So today with AI, you can use a lot of different prompts to, for example, identify into the scorecards of the interviewers what are the inconsistencies, what are the things that actually appears very often, and kind of using this information to also build your interviewing and your questions in a way that is more accurate to the topics that almost always will show up in the debriefs, so making sure that you are really focusing on assessing the right spots and using the information that you have from the recruitment process that you are doing to build this. So yeah, I would say that this is something that I would do.
Nice. Very, 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 very interesting. 100% with you. This is not always easy to implement, right? Somehow, we can still apply many things to mitigate that. For example, for me, effective soft skill assessment starts during the intake kickoff meeting with hiring manager. So that conversation for me defines the quality and also the speed of the hiring process as well. For example, during intakes, we can start asking basic questions like what made the last person succeed or fail, what a strong first 90 days would actually look like, what behaviors make someone truly successful in this team, and so on, but also clearly define what good and quality actually looks like for them, for the hiring manager in that specific environment, whether it's a startup environment or a large company. So capturing these details give us valuable information about, before we start assessing our candidates. So I think that could be a good starting point. And also, I think sometimes we are very, very focused on trying to identify what indicators or elements we should include in the quality of hire formula. We can discuss that later, but none of that will reflect reality if we don't build a solid process from the very beginning. And it starts with defining very well the way we assess our candidates, right? So let's move to the next question very, very, very quickly. So companies often focus on metrics such as quality of hire and attrition rates. So in your experience, Alessandra, how does hiring for soft skills influence quality of hire and long-term retention in tech teams?
I think that you cannot speak about quality of hire without understanding soft skills and the role of soft skills, because how a company defines quality and what does quality means for specific roles, specific levels, will have a very direct relation with the skills that you're hiring for. So I would say that like focusing on quality of hire means not only focusing on soft skills means not only that you're going to be focusing on quality, but also means that you're going to be focused on the healthiness of your team and overall how people will work together, So I think the bigger impact of having a bad hire is not only having to do the process all over again or the relationship that you're going to have with the hiring manager, that is probably not going to be the best, as TA partner, but also the impact that this bad hire will have on the team throughout the months that this bad hire will be there, like what type of influence and the impact overall in the team. So I would say that soft skills are like, basically we separate hard skills and soft skills, but I think that overall they are very correlated, right? But soft skills are like the base for any type of relationship in the workplace. And this will definitely define how the person approach the problems and the relationships and overall approach success. So definitely, I think that in long term, not only long term, short term retention, it's also very important. One thing that I would like to pin here, it's about the whole discussion about quality of hire. I think more and more in TA teams we have been discussing this, but it still is a metric that needs time, for you to investigate and for you to understand what will impact a higher quality of hire. How can you increase the quality of hire? So you have to have time, into building a solid foundation of this metric. And it's not only on TA teams, right? You need to also make sure that your onboarding process is good, that the integration of this hire will be done in the best way possible, because we can hire the best person ever, but if the person joins and doesn't have a good onboarding or doesn't have this, first introduction to the teams, it can be a bad hire, but it doesn't mean that the person didn't have the skills to do the job. It means that probably we didn't offer the best experience in the first months. And also, like, again, pinning in this point, sometimes when we are having the kickoff meetings with hiring managers, and we want to understand what does good look like, we need to be very focused on the reality of the team in that moment, and not like what we expect for the team to be in 1 year. Sometimes we look for skills that are not yet where the team is, like the team is not mature enough. So we need people that they're going to be more hands-on, maybe not that strategic, they'll be more operational. And it's completely fine for you as a TA partner to challenge your hiring manager into understanding like what is the real need that you have in your team, and not like romanticize it, or doesn't look into the reality with the eyes that you need to look. So yeah, so I would say that it is very important in terms of quality of hire, but not only this impacts quality of hire, many other things impacts also quality of hire, in my point of view.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. A lot of things to take into account. It's a combination of factors, right? And all these things, like all these soft skills, impact the quality of hire and attrition rates, right? So I have like a few questions. Like, are we really assessing these points during the hiring process? Like, are we capturing the right information from the intake, to evaluate candidates properly? Are we analyzing somehow historical data we have to identify patterns or areas for improvements? If any of the answers, it's a no, probably it's worth discussing internally, right? And of course, even if we apply all the best practices, we might still have people leave the company or underperform based on expectations. Yeah. But the idea is to keep improving, track these metrics over time, right, and get as close to excellence as possible. And the nice way to start doing this is basically having these conversations and improve, for example, creating, working groups internally, including volunteers from the TA and engineering team, and these kind of things. During my time at N26, for example, I was part of these discussions, and we made some improvements in the process. So I think it's really worth having both functions collaborate more closely, right? Alessandra, I think we are running out of time. The time really flew by.
Yes.
So basically, thanks for your time during this session, for sharing your insights today. It's been really, really valuable. Thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the talk. We're very excited to have Vanessa Rath joining us for our next event. So keep an eye out for the details on our Tribe account on LinkedIn later this next week. And yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Alessandra. I don't know if you have any last words before we finish.
No, just want to thank you so much for having the time with you, and yeah, if everybody has any other questions, comments, or suggestions, I'm also really eager to learn from other TA professionals that have new ideas. So yeah, really glad to be part of it, and I hope you all have a nice day.
Thanks a lot, Alessandra. Have a good rest of your week,
You
everyone.
too.
Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Ciao.